Welcome back, everybody. A group of protesters organized by the Democratic Party of Virginia held signs accusing Americans for Prosperity of voter fraud. When asked to comment, though, they stated very clearly that a certain amount of voter fraud is acceptable.
Do we agree with James O'Keefe that there is voter fraud?
At what percentage?
Well, what percentage is okay for you?
Six Sigma?
I don't understand what you mean. At what percentage is okay of voter fraud? You're saying that AFP commits voter fraud. I'd like to know if you have any proof of that. I'd love to see it.
999.
999 is what he replied. Make sense of that? Good luck to you. With us now is his firsthand testimony from this situation. He shot the video. It is Tony Katz. He is the conservative radio host out here from the West Coast. Good to see you, Tony.
Good to see you.
Now, first off, these folks had signs up accusing Americans for Prosperity of voter fraud.
Correct. So they were organized. I mean, this first stop was in Fairfax County, in Fairfax, Virginia. They were organized by the Virginia Democratic Party. Brian Coy, who's the communications director, was leading the way for them. And one of them had this sign that said, Americans for Prosperity, AFP supports voter fraud. So I took...
Based on what? Do you have...
Based on fantasy. By the way, I think the signs were made by the Democratic Party because they were collecting them at the end to bring them back.
So you turned it on them with the iPhone?
With this phone, and I simply said, can you prove it? Why do you have that sign? And since you're now saying that AFP supports voter fraud, are you, the Democrats, now admitting that there is voter fraud out there? And that's why I brought up James O'Keefe. Are you now admitting how easy it is for somebody to fake someone's ballot and why it's so important to have voter ID laws? And when I got into a conversation with that man right there, Cesar del Aguila, I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, he runs the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, he engaged that answer. And he said Six Sigma. What Six Sigma is, it was made popular by Jack Welch at GE. So it's a business strategy, and it dictates that the proper amount or the acceptable amount of defects per million is 3.4. He gave an actual stat to the amount of voter fraud he's okay with. I want to know if anybody's going to ask the Democratic Party if they support voter fraud, if they're engaged in voter fraud, if they find a percentage of voter fraud acceptable, because every single American across the country, if you ask them how much voter fraud is acceptable, they'll say zero.
The two lines you hear from the left regarding voter fraud are, one, the efforts to crack down on voter fraud disenfranchise, namely minorities, and two, that there's very, very little of it. Does that imply to you that some level of voter fraud is okay?
If they're going to say to me, just like Caesar did there, the head of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, that there is a percentage that they're okay with voter fraud, that's too big a percentage. It has to be zero. And the conversation you're having is one about voter suppression. First of all, no one believes in voter suppression. You know what I don't believe in? Two members of the Black Panther Party sitting in front of a polling place with billy clubs. That's voter suppression. Yet Eric Holder and the Justice Department don't seem to want to prosecute that. When you need an ID to be able to go to a Michelle Obama book signing, is that book signing suppression? When you want to go to an R-rated movie, is that movie suppression? When I want to buy a late night beer, is that beer suppression? Exactly what is suppressing the vote about an ID to make sure we know who's voting? The real conversation here is, what is it that the Virginia Democratic Party believes? What are they willing to accept? And I'm looking forward to some intrepid reporters asking them a few questions.
Now those questions will be asked, but let's not get into that beer suppression, all right?
I am as against it as you are, and I'm glad that we can agree on that.
We can agree on that. Tony Katz, radio conservative talk show host. Thank you for being here, Tony. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, my friend.
Let us know, is any amount of voter fraud okay? Find me on Twitter, Dave Briggs TV.